Good morning, Generations Church. And good morning to everybody that's on the live stream this morning. We're honored to have you with us, whether you're catching us online or whether you're in the house. It's just good to be together. I came across a meme this week that kind of made me chuckle. It's from a Disney movie, 101 Dalmatians, old movie. Anybody remember that? It's actually kind of a creepy meme. It's from a part of the movie I didn't like as a kid. It's the villain, Cruella de Vil, and she's in her car chasing the van load of Dalmatians, right? Because she wants a fur coat. You know, it's just awful when you think about it. But she's driving kind of in a mad state. Her eyes are bloodshot. Her hair is all over the place. And her oversized fur coat is flapping in the wind. And she's clutching the steering wheel of her car with this crazed, insane look in her eyes. And the caption is, "This is me trying to excel in my career, maintain a social life, drink enough water, exercise, text everyone back, stay sane, survive, and be happy." Anybody relate to that? For someone, that kind of trippy image captured how they felt about the crazy, white-knuckled, insane pace of their life. You know, you ask somebody how they're doing these days, and the typical response that you get is what? How are you? Good. Or another four-letter word would be fine. You guys aren't taking the bait here at all, are you? I'm busy. Busy. How are things? Busy. That's quite often a response that you would hear. We're busy. In fact, sometimes we are crazy busy. Even in this post-pandemic world where after we all felt like our lives got put on pause for months, you talk to a lot of people, ask them how they're doing, and it's busy. I'm busy. And that's after we all said we'd change, right? You know, we're not going to get back into that frantic pace, that frantic lifestyle, but somehow I think many of us have fallen back into that. And, you know, I remember when we first moved to the island a number of years ago, 18 years ago, I guess it was, and people kept saying, you know, you will enjoy the laid-back island life. Still looking for it. 18 years later. Now, I realize that not all of us are crazy busy. Some of us are just crazy. And some of us are maybe not as busy as we'd like to be, but the reality is that many of us are busy, and many of us are maybe more busy than we want. And it's not just the professional or the business person that's going crazy, building their career, or it's not just the parents of toddlers, although they are busy, even the parents of teenagers, you're very busy. I talk to a lot of retired people, and they say, man, I'm busy. I'm so busy. And the problem with being retired when you're busy is you never get a day off. You know, they're busy. I talk to high schoolers, and they're busy, got so much to do. And I know for some of us, our busyness it's a survival mode. You know, we're just trying to survive life. There are responsibilities and roles that we're trying to fill. We've got to make the rent. We've got to care for the family. You know, it's a challenging economy. It's a competitive, technologically driven world, and that just seems to amp up the busyness in so many ways. But we need to realize that in our culture, there's something more to all of this. There's something more to busyness that's more than just trying to survive our to-do lists, our daily tasks and responsibilities. In fact, in our culture, busyness has become a measure of worth. Busyness has become a measure of worth. To be busy is to be valuable. It's to be important. Busyness in some ways kind of justifies your life. You know, I must be doing something right because I'm busy, right? It's not just how we live, but it actually becomes who we are. And what would it say about me if I had nothing to do? What would it say about me if nothing needed me or nobody needed me? And I understand that some of us struggle with that side of the equation as well. And so we need to understand that whether we feel over busy and exhausted and stressed out of our minds, or whether we're under busy and depressed because we don't feel needed or wanted or valuable, it's really just two sides of the same coin. It's really the idol of busyness. So today we're starting a new series that we're calling Canadian Idols. It's not a spin-off of that famous reality TV show, although we may talk about our fixation with celebrity culture. We'll see. But we're going to talk about some of the idols that we wrestle with in our culture. You know, if you've been... whether or not you've been raised in church, if you've been raised in church or if you've not been raised in a church culture or have a Christian worldview, when we think about idols, I think we often think about the statues or the images that are used by many religions around the world. And it's usually, you know what, in other parts of the world. At least that's what we think. In Canada, we don't often see physical idols. It's not part of our culture in the same way. You know, unless you live in a city like Richmond. We lived in Richmond for a few years. We lived just off of Number 5 Road. And if you've ever driven down Number 5 Road in Richmond, it is a smorgasbord of world religions. It's very interesting. It's got everyone from the Baptists to the Buddhists. I mean, if you're going to have a church or a temple, you're going to build it on 5 Road in Richmond. Fascinating. And so every major religion in the world has got a temple or a building or some representation there. And so you drive down 5 Road and you could actually see into some of these buildings and see the idols. And as people moving in from the prairies of Canada, I mean, this was like crazy experience to just around the corner from our house, drive down the street and see these idols that are just part of this building, part of this temple, part of this religion. Of course, when you read the Bible, you find out all kinds of stories and teaching about idols because it was a very common thing. Every culture had their idols. Every culture symbolized and incarnated their gods in a physical way, and they worshiped these idols as their gods. And so you read the book of Acts and you find a story there about the Apostle Paul landing in the city of Athens. He was actually running from some trouble he'd gotten into in northern Greece. He was up in the city of Thessalonica, and things had kind of gone sideways there on their missions trip. So for safety reasons, he was sent to Athens and unexpectedly ended up in the city. He was waiting there for the rest of his team, and it says in verse 16 of Acts 17 that while he was waiting for them in Athens, he was deeply troubled by all the idols he saw everywhere in the city. So the city of Athens was incredibly religious. It was filled with statues of Greek gods and magnificent temples that you can still see today. And maybe you've been there, or maybe you've seen pictures of the Acropolis. I think we got a picture of it here in Athens. Incredible architecture. But what we forget is that this was more than just architecture. I mean, today we kind of copied those style of buildings to decorate our courthouses and important buildings here on this part of the world. But back then, people took their religion very seriously. It was the worship of the gods, and it was about sacrifice, and it was about prayers and ritual and incense and all of that kind of stuff. And we look at some of this stuff, what they did, and we go, wow, how could they do that? You know, we drive down a road like 5 Road in Richmond, and we look at some of those temples and some of those idols, and we look at how they worship, and we observe that. We go, wow, how could they do that? I remember as a kid being in Central America, we had gone to visit my older brother who was living in Guatemala, and we went up into the Mayan region up north towards Mexico where the ruins of Tikal are, ancient Mayan civilization, and maybe some of you have seen ruins similar in Mexico if you visited there. And so they've got these huge pyramids, and we were there before it kind of got commercialized, and so we could actually climb around on all of that. And so we did, and so you'd climb up these stairs, and at the top of the temple, there was this little room where they would keep the god. And then down at the bottom of the temple, there was this little round stone where they would make the sacrifice. And so they'd make the sacrifice, and then the priest would have to run up all of these stairs and try to get to the top with the beating heart still beating. That's what they, so if you were a priest in that religion, you had to be in shape, you know? And I didn't tell you that actually it was human sacrifice that they would do. And so they would sacrifice someone and try and run their heart up those stairs before it quit beating. And we think about that and go, that's awful. I mean, that's just horrible. That's just weird. But here's the thing. It didn't seem weird to the Mayans. It was just what they did. It was their religion, it was their life, and here's what we need to understand about idols. Your idols may seem strange to me, but my idols are normal. My idols are normal. They're just part of my life. In fact, I often don't think even that much about them. They're just kind of there. And so it's easier to see the idols when you're in another culture. And I think that's what the Apostle Paul was experiencing. He was in Athens, and it just kind of hit him walking around the city. He's like, man, this place is full of idols. Because he saw the city and he saw the culture with fresh eyes. And it says it troubled his heart. It troubled his heart. I wonder what the Apostle Paul would say if he came to Nanaimo. Do we have idols in our city? In our culture? Now, we don't have an Acropolis or a pyramid, but we have idols. I think we're just so used to them, sometimes we don't see them. But they're there. You know, that's one of the valuable things about going on a missions trip. We've got a trip going to Costa Rica. Actually, there's a couple of trips from our church going to Costa Rica to partner with our missionaries, our global workers in Costa Rica. Just names slipping. Henricks, yes. Gary and Kathy Henricks. Heinrichs. That's why I make notes. I write these things down so I don't get myself in trouble that way. But anyway, we got this trip going down, and we're excited about that. And so, in fact, you might get approached or asked by one of our team members that is going to support them, help sponsor them. We would encourage you to do that. That's a great place for an offering. But sometimes the biggest aha moments on those kind of trips is actually when you come home. Because you've been out of your culture for a while, you come home and you see your city or you see your life with fresh eyes. And you see the idols in our culture more clearly. Because you know what? My idols make sense to me. My idols are not strange or weird to me. And often we don't even think about them. We just get caught up in them because that's our world. That's our culture. And I think that's why the idolatry of busyness in our culture can sneak into our lives, because it's just the world that we live in. You say, well, how can something like busyness be idolatry? We're not bowing to an idol. You know, I don't go to a temple and offer sacrifices. I mean, really, idolatry sounds, so 3,000 years ago, right? Well, the Bible makes it clear that idol worship isn't just literally bowing down to an image of stone or an image of wood. Ultimately, idolatry is an issue of the heart. It's an issue of the heart. Back in the Old Testament, God gave the 10 commandments to the people of Israel, and the second commandment is what? Don't make any graven images. Don't make any idols. And so the people of God, they got the 10 commandments, and they're like, okay, second commandment, don't make any images, idols, gotcha, good. No graven images, not going to bow down, not going to worship any idols. Of course, you read the story, and just a few chapters later, they've made the golden calf. It didn't take them long. And then throughout their history, they struggled with external idolatry. They always seem to wrestle with these idols. But idolatry was never just about the external actions. It was about the internal attitudes, about the loyalties of the heart. And years later, the Old Testament prophets would come along and they would challenge the people of God, saying, no, you are an idolatrous people. And the people would push back and go, no, we're not idolatrous. I mean, maybe at times we have, but we're not idolatrous because we're not bowing down to idols. And in this particular time, they weren't. But it says in Ezekiel that the Lord spoke to the prophet and said, Son of man, these leaders have what? They have set up idols in their hearts. And they've embraced things that will make them fall into sin. The passage goes on to talk about how God wanted to recapture the minds and recapture the hearts of his people, because even though they didn't literally bow their knee and worship idols, their minds and their hearts had been captured by other gods. That was still the issue that Jesus had with the religious leaders and the people of God hundreds of years later. In fact, he quoted the prophet Isaiah, one of the great Old Testament prophets, again, confronting the people of God when he said, the people honor me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. Now, they were good people. They were good Jewish people. They were good religious people. They didn't literally bow down to the idols and the images that were there in their region because of the influence of the Romans and the influence of the Greeks. There were those idols. They understood what idols were, but they didn't do that. But the prophet and Jesus said, you know what, that doesn't mean you're off the hook. You see, the reason that idolatry is the most talked about sin in Scripture is not just because of the worship of idols or images that happened everywhere all the time. And it did. It was a thing. It is there. It's because idolatry isn't just about images. An idol is anything that we turn to for salvation apart from Jesus. An idol is anything that we look for things that only God can give. And in our culture, it's specifically about things like security and meaning and identity and satisfaction in life, a way to deal somehow with the guilt and with the shame, a way to justify our lives. Another word for all of that would be salvation. And maybe it's easier to see it in other cultures and other religions, people that got a whole different understanding of our world and spirituality. But it's harder to discern in our Western culture because we don't have the same kind of visible idols and shrines. Some of the most popular gods are not called gods. Some of the most popular religions aren't called religions. And some of the most popular temples aren't called temples. It's called the mall or the theater or Netflix. I'm not going there. Actually, hockey can be an idol. Football's okay, but hockey, boy. And we could talk about other stuff, and over this series we will, but these things fill the same place in our hearts. Try to make sense of our lives, give meaning to our lives, or at least they try to. But because the religiosity of our culture isn't directed vertically, it's directed horizontally, we don't see it. In fact, I learned a word this week. Somebody called it secularosity. Secularosity. A religion that worships non-religious things. It's secular. And so instead of a deity or a God, you've got other stuff that you turn to give meaning to your life. And it can be anything from work to family to, adventure or sex or any of that kind of stuff. And it's not saying that stuff is bad. It's just that good things can become God things in our lives if we let them. And instead of turning to God to deal with the emptiness that we struggle with, or maybe the shame or the guilt, or turning to God to fill our lives with purpose and satisfaction and security, we look to these horizontal things for salvation. Amen. Tim Keller defined idolatry this way. He said, an idol is whatever you look at and say in your heart of hearts, if I have that, then I'll feel my life has meaning. Then I'll know I have value. Then I'll feel significant and secure. And that's how we turn things like busyness into a God in our lives. On one hand, it makes us feel like we're really living life to the full. I mean, look at my calendar. I've got all this stuff to do. I'm busy, I'm productive, I'm contributing, I'm experiencing things. When it comes to life, we're just killing it, cramming it all in. Look at how much we're getting done. Beating back the FOMO, the fear of missing out. We're just going to do it all. Makes us feel good. Of course, on the other hand, it keeps us distracted from the things that bother us when our lives get too quiet. Those quiet moments can be scary because the nagging doubts or insecurities or uncertainties that we wrestle with begin to pop up in our lives. And boy, we just want to beat them down just by getting busy and turning up the noise in our lives so we don't have those questions or those fears or those nagging uncertainties about the future. I don't know when busyness really became a religion, because it wasn't always that way. If you read Jane Austen or watch Downton Abbey, the culture's so different. The best thing about the upper class, right, is that they didn't work. They got to do nothing all the time. That was what they glorified, and they glorified in their idleness, right? It was the lower class that had to work. It was the lower class that was busy. But, somewhere that shifted, and somehow busyness has actually become a status symbol. And keeping up with the Joneses is literally trying to keep up with the Joneses. All the stuff they do, all the stuff their kids do, it's go, 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 and wow. Author David Zoll talks about something he calls performancism. Performancism. The assumption that there is no distinction between what we do and who we are. We are what we do. So your resume isn't just what you do. Your resume is who you are. It's what makes you lovable and significant. It's about what you're good at. It's about how full your life is. It's about your Instagram stream or your social media post that tells the story of the great life that you're living. How you're #winning, right? We're doing it. It's how we justify our existence and give meaning to our lives. But I think what we're all beginning to understand, if we'd stop and think, is that it's that kind of performance orientation that has led to skyrocketing anxiety It's led to exhaustion. It's led to loneliness. Because busyness is just like being on a treadmill that keeps getting turned up in speed, right? It just keeps getting faster. And it's just so hard to keep up, especially with the technology that we're all carrying around in our pockets. It's just there. And friends, that's not to say that what we're doing is necessarily sinful or immoral or wrong in and of itself. So much of what we're doing, it's good stuff. It's good stuff. It's that we're attaching a significance to it. We're attaching a meaning to it that actually becomes toxic to our hearts and corrodes our soul. Because we're looking to our activities, we're looking to our adventures and our roles to satisfy us in a way that only God can. You know, that's one of the reasons why God gave us the Sabbath. We're supposed to take one day of our week and set it aside to what? To rest and to worship. We misunderstand Sabbath. We think of it as a day maybe to get caught up on everything else that we couldn't get to in the busyness of the week. Or we think of it as a day to go out and exhaust ourselves doing something epic that we didn't have time to do, to do all the fun stuff on the weekend. But just a couple of commands after the one about the idols in Exodus 20, the commandment is, remember to observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy. You got 6 days each week to do your ordinary work, but the seventh day is a Sabbath, a day of rest dedicated to the Lord. And friends, one of the primary purposes of the Sabbath is to help us understand that you are not what you do. You're not what you do. You are not what you produce. You are not what you accomplish. You are not what you experience. In fact, it's so interesting when you go to the book of Deuteronomy and you read the Ten Commandments that are there, there's this verse that's added in verse 15 of Deuteronomy 5 where it says, remember that you were once slaves in Egypt, but the Lord your God brought you out with a strong hand and powerful arm. That's why the Lord your God has commanded you to rest on the Sabbath day, to deliver you from the slavery of your busyness. You are not what you do. Your value, your significance, your worth is not tied to what you produce or what you get done or what you experience in your life, because you can't work your way to significance. Significance. It's really just a secular word for salvation. I think one of the most comforting things that Jesus ever said is found in Matthew chapter 11. And it comes right before a couple of important stories about the Sabbath. Jesus says this, come to me, all of you who are weary and carry heavy burdens, and I will give you rest. Give you rest. And rest is not a passive word in this sense. It is to cause someone to take a break from busyness in order to be refreshed. It's an active word. It's an intervention word. Jesus says, listen, I want to intervene in your lives. Take my yoke upon me. Let me teach you, because I am humble and gentle at heart, and you will find rest for your souls. I think that's ultimately what we're looking for. We're looking for rest for our souls, and it wasn't found through the oppressive burden of religious legalism in Jesus' day. And friends, it's not found in the oppressive burden that we impose on ourselves today. Our drive for accomplishment, our drive for success, our drive to prove ourselves. Jesus says, you don't have to do all of that. You can't prove yourself in that way, because your worth, your value, your significance is not found in what you do. You find rest when you come to me. Jesus says, just come to me. You'll find rest for your souls. We've been learning about rest in a fresh way at our house for the past 6 weeks. And just right off the top, I have permission to tell this story. So Aileen and I have talked about this, and she said, yeah, share this. So back in December, Aileen went to visit her mom, who lives in Edmonton. And the morning that she left, was coming back home, she was making the bed in the guest room, and she tripped as she was doing that, and she went crashing into the wall, head first like that. And it happened so quick she didn't have time to get her hands up, so she hit the wall and really stunned herself. She didn't knock herself out, but her mom came running, and are you all right? And then she's, well, I'm feeling kind of woozy, and she took some Tylenol, and of course, then she had to go to the airport, catch her plane, and came home, and really didn't think much of it. I mean, we all hit our heads from time to time. I mean, if you're like me, it's every day, and it's just something that happens. So she was a little sore, but as the days went on, her symptoms didn't go away. In fact, they got worse, and she realized that she'd experienced something she never experienced before. She had actually had a concussion. And so she tried to go to work, wasn't able to go to work, went and saw the doctor, got engaged with some great medical treatment and other medical help in that way, and, obviously went into concussion protocol. And you know what that is? It's rest, it's no activity, it's no bright lights, it's no noisy environments, because, that kind of stuff just triggers her reaction. And so she's tried to come to church a couple of times, and, she just instantly getting that headache. So Aileen's not here this morning, and some of you noticed that she hasn't been here for a number of weeks, and she just wants you to know that she still loves Jesus. She still loves me. Still loves the church. In fact, she's watching on the live stream. She's probably tuning in mostly because she needs to hear what I'm saying about her this morning. But no, and thank you for all of you who work hard on our live stream, making it happen. We really appreciate that. And, we just work hard. And it's given us a fresh appreciation for, those of you that are maybe watching online that can't participate in a gathering like this. And so we're glad that we can come into your home where you're at to be part of this. But so she's watching because she can't be in this environment because it just kind of triggers her. But it's been a hard few weeks, so she's not been feeling well. And not only that, but she just likes to be busy. She's a person that likes to be busy, so she's missed work, and she's missed being with her friends at work, and she's missed church, and she missed stuff like Christmas and our Christmas Eve service, and so she's missed all of that. And she wants me to say, how gratefully she is for the prayer that she's experienced from you and the text of encouragement. And I know we haven't said a whole lot about it because, it really didn't seem like a big deal. But now, like 6 weeks later, we're like, well, this has actually been kind of a big deal. So she's been learning about the importance of rest and how the value of life is not about our busyness or about our accomplishments. So last Sunday morning, and I'm going to wrap this up, but last Sunday morning I was busy scrambling, trying to get ready for church, and Sunday mornings always a bit frantic for me. Busy trying to get my message finished up and reviewed and, kind of think through the morning and the day and spend some time with Jesus in prayer. And so I'm doing all that busy spiritual, religious stuff, and Aileen is reading the gospel. She's reading in Matthew chapter 4 about how Jesus traveled around teaching and healing every kind of disease. And as he healed people, they just kept coming to him with more people that needed healing. And then she says she started to imagine Jesus coming to Nanaimo. And Jesus here in Nanaimo, and how the crowds would gather and come from all over the island to be with Jesus and to be healed by Jesus. And there were people coming up from Victoria and coming down from Comox and coming across from the lower mainland. And anybody with a sickness would come, whether it was physical or emotional or mental, and Jesus was just healing them. And then she says, I began to imagine the people who I would bring to Jesus. She said, I started kind of putting them in front of Jesus, naming all the people that she'd been praying for and just kind of putting them in front of Jesus and making this long line of people waiting to see Jesus. And with all of these precious people that were ahead of her in this line, she said, suddenly Jesus called out to her and called her to the front of the line. And she said, I thought he wanted me to come so I could see him heal people and grow my faith in that way. But she says, what he wanted to do was show me his healing power by first healing me. And she said in that moment, she was just overwhelmed by his love, by his presence. She was just amazed that Jesus would call out to her by name and heal her. She said, how amazing. And friends, the healing that we're looking for, ultimately it's found in Jesus. The rest that we need for our broken lives, it's found in Jesus. The peace, the security, the satisfaction, the meaning for our lives, it's found in Jesus. And friends, this morning, he's calling you. He's calling you. He knows you by name. And friends, there's no lineups for Jesus. Even when you're making the line, he calls you to the front of the line because there's no lines with Jesus. And you don't have to prove yourself to him because it's not about what you do. Jesus loves you for who you are, not for what you do. And you don't have to prove yourself to Jesus, and you don't have to prove yourself to others, and you don't have to prove yourself to you. You can find rest for your souls. The rest that we're looking for is found in Jesus. The security, the meaning, the significance that we're all chasing through all the other stuff is only going to be found when we come and we give ourselves to Jesus. So he knows your name. And he's calling you this morning to step away from the idol of busyness and come and find your rest and your satisfaction in him. And you don't have to prove yourself, you just have to come. Let's pray. Jesus, I pray that you would help us to see our lives in a fresh way this morning. Lord, how our minds and our hearts maybe have been captured by other things without us even realizing it, how we've measured our worth and our value through our achievements or our accomplishments or our calendar. But God, help us to understand it's not about what other people think of us. It's not about what we think of ourselves. The rest that we're looking for is found in you. The security, the satisfaction, the enoughness. So, Lord, dethrone the idols that creep into our lives. Amen. Amen. Would you stand with me? Let's sing together.
Here is where I lay it down, every burden, every crown. This is my surrender. This is my surrender. Here is where I lay it down, every lie and every doubt. This is my surrender. and I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to. Tradition, break up the walls of all my religion. Your way is better, your way is better. Shake up the ground of all my tradition, break down the walls of all my religion. Your way is better. This is my surrender, and I will make room for you to do whatever you want to do whatever you want to, and I will make room for you.